one crucial demand is definition of climate finance, which is yet to be agreed upon. There is no clear roadmap on $100 billion mobilization and new quantified goal. Urgent and adequate replenishment for Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund is also looked for. On loss and damage, draft conclusion prepared by the SBI chair and forwarded to CMA, which is being negotiated under CMA agenda item. The function and institutional arrangement of the Santiago network on loss and damage have reflected in the draft conclusion and will be further elaborated in next subsidiary body meetings. However, they are not complete as no specific reference to funding for loss and damage. Thank you all.
Thanks to our Honorable Minister for his speech in this press conference. Dear respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, and representatives from the national and international media. Now, I open the floor for the question and answer session. I request you to place your questions, and our delegates from Bangladesh are in the podium, and I request the sirs to answer the questions which will come from the floor. Now, I am inviting questions from the floor. Yes, please. I request you to take the mic too.
Myself, Jayanta Basu from the Telegraph newspaper, ABP, India. Honorable Minister, you just mentioned about the Bangladesh priorities and what exactly you want to be part of the cover decision. We all know the cover decision, outline of the cover decision or the discussion to be held has come out yesterday. And we find all sort of things are there. In one line, they are saying that $100 billion is not there. The second line, they are saying that there is adequate finance. So my question as the chair of the vulnerable countries to Bangladesh is two questions. Number one is, at this point of time, the second week has just started. The actual negotiation has just started. What is your stand at this point of time regarding the vulnerable countries? What exactly you want in a pragmatic way at next Friday? What are the red lines? Where do you agree, which we will not agree? That's my first question. And second question is, apparently the UK is pushing the net zero as the success point of this summit. We all know that it will be going up as a net zero summit. So while we are talking about net zero is a good thing down the 2050 or whatever, but that at the same time, all the real issues, finance, loss and damage are being pushed back. So how happy you are with this all sucking net zero into the whole process? What's your stand on that? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I'm Sabir Chaudhary. I chair the Parliamentary Committee on Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. With regard to the first question, as you have also acknowledged, we are only starting the second week. So we don't want to pre-call it or pre-judge it. You know, we are all here in good faith. We know that trust is in short supply. There is a huge trust deficit. And we hope one of the areas that will be different in this COP is going to be the bridges are going to be built and the trust is going to be reestablished. And when you talk about a Bangladesh position, I think it's the global position. You know, we are not demanding something just for Bangladesh. We are asking for something which is good for the planet. And so when we talk about our red lines, of course the 1.5 is a red line. And I think, you know, we are encouraged by the fact that Paris doesn't actually specify 1.5. It talks about 2 and below. But the fact that 1.5 now seems to be generally accepted, I think it's positive. Having said that, the caveat that I would put on it is look at the suffering, look at the pain, look at the devastation, the loss that we are suffering at 1.1 degrees Celsius. So 1.5 is not a silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems. That should be the absolute minimum. We can't go above that. And even at that level, there is going to be considerable needs for adaptation, loss and damage comes into the picture. So that's number one. In terms of the finance, we are not asking for anything new. It's not a new proposition. We are merely asking the world or the global community to live up to their commitments. That commitment was $100 billion from 2020, and there'll be an equal split between adaptation and mitigation. So not only have we failed to reach 100 billion, the mix between adaptation and mitigation is really skewed. I think we are now looking at about 20-25% adaptation, and the rest is on mitigation. So we want an equal balance. And of course, when you look at it down the road, if you're looking at 2024 onwards, this figure has to be raised substantially. Because when we talk about 100 billion compared to the needs, it is nowhere near adequate. So we are also focused on the post-2024 architecture, the financial architecture. So that's there. And then the whole issue of how we deal with displacement. Bangladesh has this very real issue. Of course, we sympathize fully. We are in full solidarity with the CVF and the small island nations as well on this. Just a 1 meter rise in sea level is going to potentially displace 40 million people. 40 million, 40. And so what do we do? That too in one of the most densely populated countries. If there's a 1 meter rise in sea level, we are projecting that the land boundaries, the map of Bangladesh is going to change. We will lose acreage, which is now there for food. So food security is a problem. Water stress is a problem. You are from India, and the Himalayas are the water towers for South Asia. They supply fresh water to 800 million people. So once the glaciers run dry and they melt, where are we going to get our supply of fresh water? So these are all existential challenges for Bangladesh. So when you're talking about existential challenges, there is no red line as such. It's what you need to achieve. And there is no second chance. So this COP has to get it right because there isn't a second planet. So we are hoping that we are going to deliver on Paris. And the other important point to differentiate is, you have the UNFCCC as a treaty, and you have the Paris Agreement. So if global leaders fail to deliver on Paris, they are also failing the treaty. The fundamental objective of the treaty is to stabilize concentrations of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. And that we are patently failing to do. So it's not just a failure to arrive at a decision at COP. You're also frustrating the treaty that all of the countries have signed up to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our time is up to 5 p.m. Actually, I want to take some quick questions.
One thing I can add regarding the fund. We are telling for the 100 billion, but at the same time, as you say, we have sufficient fund. This is our commitment. You see, in our NDC, we are committed to reduce our emission 6.53%. And this is not supported from outside fund. We have our 8 5-year plan, and every development project considers the emission issue. At the same time, we have a separate program. We have climate fund, especially. So 6.53 is not supported by outside fund. This is from our own fund. Here is the question of sufficiency. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. My name is John Mary Odoi from Uganda, and I'd like to thank you for the submission that you've made. My question is that developing countries, which I think your country is as well, we are concentrating so much on looking up to the developed countries to raise their 100 billion. And we are actually waiting very anxiously to see how that money comes so that we can be able to roll out our programs. I'm just wondering whether there is plan B for your country or for the various countries, the developing countries, whether there's plan B in case that money does not come, maybe in time, or even if it comes, maybe it's going to be hard to access it. Is there anything that we can do to see that, other than that, maybe there's also another process through which you can raise funds to do the kind of work that we're expected to do? Thank you.
May I answer that? Ms. Kholikud?
Sir, I request Kholikud sir to answer this question.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good question. We are looking up to them to give us money and then do our adaptation and other activities. But Bangladesh is not just looking up to them. We are also trying on our own. We have a trust fund where money is transferred from the budget directly for climate action. And then also in the budget itself, under several categories, we spent about 1.5% of our GDP on climate actions. But that's not enough, because the world is fast becoming more and more vulnerable to climate change, and Bangladesh is at the forefront. And therefore, there are more sea level rise, salinity ingression, river erosion, cyclones, floods, not drought also, and rains not at the time when it should be, and at other times when we don't need the rains. So these are all the elements in the changing pattern of climate. And therefore, we need much more money. But we are trying our best with our own resources, whatever we can do. But we need two things, essentially. One is technology, and the other is finance. Finance is necessary if we want to adequately address the problems that have been created. It's not our fault. So it's the fault of those who have been emitting greenhouse gases for a long time. They are the ones who have caused it, and they should come forward to help. And they have committed. The more important thing is they have committed. In the IPCC process, they have agreed that they are responsible. I have been IPCC lead authors in 2 third and fourth assessments. So they have agreed. And they have also committed funds. But the problem is commitment is not delivered. So we now want, from now on, commitment has been made. 100 billion way back in Copenhagen 10, 11 years ago. But only about 20 billion has been delivered to the GCF. And there, just one moment. Then, no, it is, we are told that 80 billion has been provided under this umbrella. The 80 billion is out of 200 billion, 2 years, so 120 billion short. Now we are talking that in 23 that will be fulfilled. So I think we should walk the talk internationally, and we should be very transparent. Sometimes transparency is making our life hell. We are told we have got so much, but when we go down to the brass tacks, it's not there.
To the end of the time, sir, I want to take only one question. I just request you to go to her.
Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. I'm Elizabeth from Norwegian Press. 2 questions, very short ones. The one is, what is Bangladesh's position on giving refugee rights to climate refugees on equal level with other refugees? And the second one, tomorrow I realized that here in this forum there will be the Gender and Women Day, and I was wondering your position when it comes to the plight of women under the climate crisis in Bangladesh particularly. Thank you very much.
I request Dr. Ainul Nishat to address this question from Bangladesh.
Thank you. Madam, short questions require long answers. So when you say short question, I got scared. But the answers are very straightforward. Gender is taken seriously, and we are now developing the National Adaptation Plan, and it will pay attention to all issues concerned with gender issues and as well as physical disability. And our motto would be, our principle would be, no one should be left behind. So we are working that. We have a strategy document and planning process is going on. Our parliament is very serious about it, so any action plan we prepare, gender is seriously considered. And the other question was, refugees. We have already started taking up evaluation of the people who are moving out. From the coastal belt, people are moving out. In fact, from my district, where my ancestral home is, in some of the villages, the population is hardly 1/3 of the original. So the storm surges and salinity increase are forcing people to move out. We have already taken projects to rehabilitate the people who have moved out inside the country. Under Prime Minister's patronage, we are constructing small but reasonably, to meet the basic requirement, houses for the people who are losing their land mainly due to riverbank erosion and also to storm surges. We are not only paying attention to that, we have action plan to respond to this particular action. But what we are scared is, the Honorable Member of Parliament said, the number could be mind-boggling. So we have started to work, pay attention to it, but we do not know how we will handle the magnitude of the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We are at the end of our session. Now I request our Honorable Minister, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Mr. M.D. Shahabuddin MP, for giving thanks to the audience for participating here. Mr. M.D. Shahabuddin MP, Honorable Minister.
Wishes to balanced and fair outcome at Glasgow by strengthening a common global commitment for living healthy and planet for our future generation. Thank you all.
No, I'm sorry. I see. How can you not know?
accelerate adaptation action to keep us safe. It is very disheartening to note that the global
financing partnership, and ministers will speak to these three themes. And thirdly,
COP26 could not be more important, because the reality is we have been failing. We have been failing the world, and we have been failing the most vulnerable communities living on the front lines. If we do not take the necessary steps to cut carbon emissions and adapt to the realities of our changing climate, the future could not be more bleak. Yet the response by governments around the world to the COVID-19 pandemic has shown what is possible when we face imminent peril. We must harness this same drive today in our response to existential climate threats. We cannot continue with business as usual. The most vulnerable are already bearing the brunt of our accelerating climate crisis. It is time for a change, and we all have a responsibility to make it happen. Young people are accusing us of not acting with a sense of urgency the climate emergency requires. We must show them we understand there can be no more hollow promises, and that we understand the opportunity there is to transform our world to a sustainable and resilient future, to allow countries to move from climate vulnerability to climate prosperity. Because adaptation is not only the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. $1 spent on climate resilience can see returns on investment of 20 to 1. This is why I'm pleased to see the United Kingdom has made adaptation a priority for this COP26, and that over 30 countries have now submitted adaptation communications or national adaptation plans representing more than 2 billion people, helping to share best practice and mobilize action. But a step change is needed to address the gaps in ambition, on mitigation, on adaptation, and on finance. To support the delivery of the Paris Climate Change Agreement goals, as the only international organization dedicated entirely to accelerating adaptation action, the Global Center on Adaptation, GCA, with Dr. Verkooyen at the helm, is ready to play its part in this transformation. To urgently accelerate climate action and ensure finance is flowing to support this transition, especially for the poorest and the most vulnerable. There is no time to waste. Thank you for your commitment and leadership.
thank you so much, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, for your strong words of guidance. Let's move to the next speaker, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed. We all know her, we all love her. She has been a very strong advocate on adaptation, particularly also for Africa, and also calling for this 50-50 split between mitigation. Thank you.
Around the world, people are struggling with climate change. The signs are all around us: floods, droughts, heat, and catastrophic storms. The human toll is devastating: lost lives and livelihoods, displacement and migration, and young people losing hope in the future. And the burden will fall disproportionately on the poor and vulnerable, who contributed least to this problem. As we decrease emissions, we must also increase ambition on adaptation. All countries, but especially developing ones, need to support to build climate resilient and green economies. The adaptation finance gap is considerable. The latest OECD report shows that just over $20 billion, about 25% of total climate finance, goes to adaptation. This is a fraction of the expected $300 billion needed by 2030. That's why the Secretary General continues to call on all donors to allocate at least 50% of their climate finance to adaptation. Multilateral development banks should start as soon as possible. Support for adaptation and resilience not only saves lives and livelihoods, it can also help countries recover from COVID-19 by investing in green jobs and infrastructure. Step by step, we are moving towards a more resilient future and the implementation of the SDGs. But we must do more. We must accelerate and scale up solutions like these. And that's what this meeting is all about. I look forward to hearing the results of your discussion. Let's continue joining forces to boost adaptation finance and deliver the green economic transformation that humanity requires for our planet, for our children, and for our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, also reminding us this is a growth agenda, this is a jobs agenda, this is an opportunity agenda. But also, let's not be naive. Those who are suffering the most, as we said, are living in the global south, but also is the youth constituency. We already see massive impacts across the globe, but that will also increase over time. So let us hear from a youth voice of urgency. Emily Dola, please.
Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are live streaming or seeing from. Thanks so much for being here, and I really mean that because I think that throughout the last week, all of us has been hearing a lot of frustration, a lot of protests about how action on adaptation and loss and damage is moving really slow. However, I just came from the first meeting for the presidency, which was on frontline communities, and I realized that we can still win this race, we can still do this, but it really depends on how fast can we mobilize funding and resources for adaptation action led by local groups on the ground and by local governments, which isn't getting there fast enough. I also realized that we really need to make sure that we break through to some negotiation items, particularly around how to better operationalize Santiago network for loss and damage, as well as how to better support countries to develop national adaptation plans and communications. This includes support from finance and resources, but we must be careful with climate finance. We really want to advocate for more climate finance be given in the forms of grants and not simply in the forms of loan. Since economic equity is really important for the adaptive capacity of countries, and that has been highlighted in reports by the IPCC as well. More last but not least, we want all countries and ministers to consider that when they're thinking about vulnerability to climate adaptation and to loss and damage, they might look at communities as diverse members in which some groups are more affected by the impacts of climate change than others, from women and girls to disabled people to the elderly through young people. That means that any adaptation plans must be responsive to these differences around social marginalization and discrimination. They must consider this. And also, at the same time, we know that nature has been a really big theme in this COP. So we really hope that when